If you can only produce in one genre, you're going to miss out on opportunities, fans, customers, and more. Switching from genre to genre isn't as hard as you think, and I'm going to show you the strategies, secrets, and tools to make it happen. The very first thing you need to do is get familiar with the genre. There's so many different things you need to know, including the BPM, the scales that are used, the keys that are often used, and also having a lot of the samples that are very common in that genre. I compiled this guide here, which is a very good starting point, but it's not a rule, so make sure to go and learn the songs in that genre and figure out the style that you want. To give you an example of this in action, this is an R&B melody I cooked up here, and as you can see, the root notes follow a very kind of sad progression, and then turned into triads. It has this kind of negative resolution at the end, which makes it sound a little bit darker and a bit sadder. Whereas for an EDM melody, I want something a bit happier and a bit more dance themed. So we have this chord here. We have this slightly mysterious chord here. The resolution is a bit happier, with this note up here at the top as well, which blends into a bit more of a happier, energetic beat like this. Now I'm going to show you from scratch how to follow that guide from earlier. First, you pick a scale. I'm just going to grab C minor. I want to go into view, scale highlighting, and then select C. I'm going to pick this chord progression here. As you can see, we have 1, we have 6, and then we have 5, which are all major chords. So when you place those root notes down, you have these notes here. To build a minor chord, there's 2 gaps between the first and the second note, and 3 gaps between the second and third. And I've done that for all of these here. To build a major chord, there's 2 gaps between the first and the second, and 3 gaps between the second and the third note. And as you can see, these chords here come up pretty high. You can actually lower these an octave. And you have a pretty dark melody, which I'm sure you recognize from a lot of different trap tracks. They all have that similar kind of vibe. Another way you can get that trap hip-hop kind of vibe is by going into an arpeggiator. And you add a little bit more bounce to the melody by doing that. The last thing to keep in mind for the melody section is the sound selection that you use. It's so easy to switch from genre to genre and instantly get the signature sound if you have the samples that are right for it. It doesn't mean that you should use these famous sounds in every beat, but it's an amazing starting point. For example, some kind of bell like this. And then you can go and grab something like a flute, which is really popular in trap. And if you want to be smart, you can go and revert this to the original chord progression to get a different kind of vibe for this melody. If you're making R&B, it's really good to have live vocals. It's also good to have some smooth kind of bass, a wide piano, stuff with a lot of warmth to it. Going back to that example from the start, I have this live vocal here from a wave grind sample pack. It's from the producer HitLab, so if you click the link in the description, you can get it for 95% off. It has 15,000 royalty-free samples and MIDI, live vocals, free bonuses, everything. And if we listen to this here, the live vocals really fit into it, and I went and sliced them up to get that cool kind of R&B soulful vibe. So when starting your track and your melody, make sure you pick something in the right kind of BPM range. Make sure you go and use a chord progression that fits the emotion for that genre. Make sure to go and use sounds that fit into your track and complement it without really standing out and clashing with the drums and any vocals. The second very important step are the drum samples and the drum bounce. Make sure you go and have drum kits and samples that are perfect for that genre. EDM tends to have like really fat synth electronic style basses. Pop tends to have a little bit of a smoother bass or a sub bass, which is the same for R&B, whereas trap and drill have more of kind of a spins 808 or a distorted 808. For EDM, you tend to have rises, transitions, and build-up samples, whereas on the drop for trap, hip-hop, or drill, for example, you'll maybe have a big crash or a brass shot or an impact or something like that. The producer HitLab has drum samples for every single genre, but wherever you get your samples from, just make sure that they'll blend in well with the beat that you're making, or you're going to be on the back foot the whole time. The cherry on top can be adding some really special samples for the genre. For example, you have the mustard snap, which can be good on a kind of slower hip-hop or R&B track. You have the listen chant.
Hey, listen!
You have the spins 808. There's no rules for which samples you have to use for a certain genre, but it's really going to help to blend into that genre by having these at least as a starting point. You have a look at this R&B beat here. It's a little bit more of a smooth, kind of simpler vibe. The 808 isn't doing anything crazy. You don't have any kind of perk fills or 808 slides, and it blends in really nicely with the melody. For something that's like EDM, pop, or a more kind of dance style, you have a little bit more of a 4 on the floor pattern. If you can't get the bounce right for whatever track you're working on, go and listen to some beats in that genre, and you'll be able to kind of find out what the snare, what the kick, what the hi-hat, what they're doing, and how it sounds different to what you're making. Moving into trap and hip hop, things get a bit more complicated with the drums. For example, you potentially have some 808 slides like this. I like building up bounce by adding variations between the kick and the 808. When these hit together, it sounds really syncopated. When they're apart, it can add so much bounce to the actual track. As you can see in this section here, we have the kick hitting and the 808 coming in later. And we have the inverse happening here. So much of the energy also comes from the hi-hats. For example, if you have a look at this hi-hat sequence here, you can add hi-hat rolls by going and selecting a hi-hat, making sure you have the timing on the setting you want, and clicking Control U, which is going to slice it up like this. And if you want a more intense hi-hat roll like this, you can go into the magnet, grab something like 1/3 step, click Control U, and it's going to slice it up like this one here. I also have this fill snare here, which adds so much bounce. So when you're making a drum beat in a certain genre, make sure to use the samples that fit that genre. Make sure that your timing and bounce is right. For example, in R&B, pop, and dance, you'll have a bit of a smoother kind of vibe. Whereas trap, hip hop, drill, they're going to be faster, they're going to have more bounce, they're often going to have more layers, and there's going to be more energy. The next very important step is arrangement. If you're sending this track out to a vocalist or an artist for placements, it's very likely that the engineer is going to go and change the track around in the arrangement anyways. But it's really good to have it right from the start to increase the chance they're actually going to use it. I like to split the beat into 3 main parts. You have the melody/intro, which is just some of the melody layers. You then have the verse, where I tend to take out some of the melody layers and have the drum beat in, so it sounds a little bit more raw and there's more room for the vocals. And then you have the hook, which is a little bit wider and has a couple extra melody layers, which makes it sound a bit more full. And you can even go and take out some of the drum layers. Once you have the sections for your beat, it's time to go and arrange it. This guide here has some very common ways to arrange your track. For example, this one here has an 8-bar intro, a 16-bar verse, and then an 8-bar hook. And these are all repeated 3 times, and then you have an 8-bar outro. For example, you have an 8-bar intro here, you have your 16-bar verse, and then you have your 8-bar hook here. You go and repeat that throughout the track, and then you have your 8-bar outro here. If you just follow that, you'll be fine 99% of the time. But if you want to spice it up for each genre, EDM tends to have a little bit more of a build-up, which is like a verse, but you have a riser in there and a snare roll at the end. For trap beats, you can often have some more complicated intros. For example, you have the Pharrell intro, or you bring the beat in straight away. Some pop songs tend to have a bridge, where they go and change around the key or the chord progression. This could be as simple as adding a different plugin on the melody to chop it up, change around the pitch, and make it sound unique. And the more you study and listen to this genre, the more familiar you will be with it. The 4th step is mixing. I have so many in-depth mixing tutorials, but to compress it into one section, go and add every single layer in your beat to a mixer track. Turn the volume up on your headphones or speakers, and mix the track really quiet, bringing in each layer one by one. It's good to have a few different reference tracks, so go and pick your favorite tracks from that genre, listen to it, keep an eye out for how loud that specific layer is, and go and see if that matches to the volume of your track as you're mixing it. What happens next is where the variations come in. Lo-fi producers, for example, tend to start with the vocals if they're using them, meaning what they export is going to be the finished version that goes on streaming platforms. For this, go and use a mastering plugin. Go and have a look at the LUFs for every single streaming platform. You can use this guide here, and they're ready for people to listen to. With trap, hip hop, and drill, it's very likely you're going to be sending this beat out for placements or for beat sales. Go and add a soft clipper, maximizer, or compressor to boost the volume without distorting the track, and go and send it out for placements or upload it on YouTube and your website. If you intend to have vocals on this track, go and download an acapella for a song in the genre you want to produce in. Go and drag it over the top and see if it fits. It's very likely you'll realize that your beat is too complicated, has too many layers, or is really crowded in the EQ range this acapella is in. And if that's the case, go and take out some layers. You can always bring them in later and substitute them with other layers, and potentially lower the volume or that EQ range in your beat, which gives more room for the vocals. I hope you learned a lot from this and can use this to make tracks in every single genre. If you want samples for every genre, as well as MIDI, chord progressions, live vocals, and more, click the link in the description to get the Producer Hit Lab for 95% off. If you want to learn how top producers make their tracks or how to mix your tracks, click one of the recommended videos or go to my page.